friends, excuse the camera in my face, but today I will film a long-awaited video, and this is to tour all my Japanese notebooks. So yeah, I have quite a different setup today, so let's see if it works. And since I have quite a lot of notebooks to show you today, I grouped them into 3 categories. So let's get started with the completed first, because those are obviously the oldest. And I'm actually missing my first ever Japanese notebook because I think I started it back in 2013, probably. But then I started studying Japanese again in 2019, in my last year of university. And I actually have my notebook from my university course here. And when I open it, there are actually quite a lot of overviews, and there I marked all the kanji I kind of knew after the first couple of lessons. The ones I colored in completely I knew very well, especially the dark green ones, and then the one with the green dot I kind of knew but still needed a little bit more of a review for, and the red ones I didn't know at all. And then we have another kanji review because I wanted to write my own to study, and I kept it running, and every time we learned a new kanji I added it to this list. So yeah, I always knew what kanji to review and what kanji to study. There are quite a few pages actually. And then we have a verb overview because my sensei gave us those sheets, and there you can see all the ru verbs we learned and then all the yu verbs. And then also the irregular verbs. And every time we learned a new verb, we actually went to the overview and then wrote down what it means in German, and then the dictionary form, the mass form, and the te form. And I think it was a really good idea because it was really easy to study the verbs that way because you always had the picture. And then we also had an overview for the e-adjectives and also the na adjectives at the bottom. And then I made my own overview for the weekdays, for the days, for the particles, and also for question words, how to conjugate adjectives. There I have my hiragana and katakana overview. That's where actually everything starts. So this was the first lesson we had, I think, and it was all about numbers and what are kanjis, what writing systems are there, and des, which is the easiest thing, of course, to study. And then European cities and also country names, katakana, and then more beginner stuff. At the start of the folder, I only wrote all the grammar things we learned. And at the end of the folder, I actually wrote all the exercises down because I knew I didn't really have to remember all the exercises, just the grammar stuff, and then practice it a little bit. So that's why I separated it. And then, yeah, a lot of grammar stuff. And then we stopped after chapter 12 because we ran out of time. And yeah, again, a kanji overview, really short and just 1 page, again, to just remember what I've learned. And oh yeah, then there are a lot of practice exercises we had to hand in. And then also some tests we got graded on. And yeah, really cute. Really interesting to look back and see all my beginner mistakes, which are obviously now kind of dumb mistakes for me, but of course you don't really know better when you're just starting out. Then there are all the exercises I did in the textbook and also in the workbook. And yeah, they're just pages and pages full of exercises. And I think that's probably it. Yeah, so my first ever notebook is done. And then, at the same time, I also started to use a kind of kanji workbook, with grid paper, where I was able to write all the kanji I studied and just practice the writing. And my kanji didn't look pretty at the start. Not at all. I mean, what's that? And yeah, it definitely got better over time. I mean, if you compare it to the back, it looks a lot better. I mean, it's not perfect yet, but yeah, it definitely looks better. I only have a couple of pages left because then I started a new kanji workbook because I'm currently studying the writings for the kanji in the Kanji Look and Learn workbook. And yeah, I just wanted to have it in a separate notebook because I didn't want to start a new project and then having to start a new workbook like just a couple of days after. So this is also complete. The next one is actually from September 2022 until March 2023. I wrote it down beforehand because I can't remember like all of this. It's actually supposed to be like a calendar, but I just used it for writing daily sentences. I tried to just write one sentence per day. And then I also had like all the vocabulary I would learn on the other page. And sometimes I also wrote some grammar points down if I studied a few new ones. Most of the time it was just like vocabulary. Definitely a good way to practice writing because I was kind of afraid to output at this time. And doing one sentence a day was still kind of daunting, but I made it. And now it's not that hard anymore for me to write in Japanese. And I can write full-on text like half a page long. So it definitely worked. And I would also do it again. And then I stopped doing it in April of 2023. Yeah, because I started to prepare for the JLPT and I just wanted to focus on the JLPT and 4 and not get distracted by any other side projects. So that's why I stopped writing sentences in here. Those were all my completed workbooks. Now let's get into my paused workbooks. So first, I have this one, and that's from January 2023 until now, kind of. But I haven't really used it in, I think, like half a year, so that's why I would consider it as paused. And here I just continue doing Genki stuff. So Genki exercises, and there I started with chapter 22, so I skipped a lot because I actually had another notebook in between my black folder and this one, but I think I just threw it away because I was a little bit annoyed with it. The cover was really, really cute, but the paper was just awful, and I was so happy when I finished it and I didn't have to write it anymore. And then I also studied by myself at this point, I think, because after university I studied with a friend and we also did a lot of exercises like orally. Then we kind of like grew apart study-wise because he was a bit faster than I was, and yeah, I wasn't able to keep up because I just put in like 1 or 2 hours a week and he definitely studied way more. That's why I definitely went all in with doing all the Genki exercises. This was definitely also the start of 2023, because then in April as well, I started to study from the Shinkansen Master workbooks for the N4 level to prepare for the JLPT. This was the listening book, and then I also took notes from the Libra app, which is the vocabulary app I had on my iPad back then. But yeah, I didn't really last long on this app, and I just wrote a few words down that were supposed to be N4, but I didn't know yet. And then reading practice. So this was then the Shinkansen Master reading book. I went through all the grammar points I had to study for the JLPT N4, and I had a lot of trouble with transitive and intransitive, and I still have a little bit of trouble with it, to be honest. So I wrote a few like exercises down and try to get like the differences in my brain. And the same goes for conjunctions. And I think there I did a few exercises from the Nihongo Challenge books. Yeah, text grammar, that sounds like the Nihongo Challenge books. Then I did the mock exams from the Japanese Foundation. Then I also wrote down the mistakes I made during the exam and also tried to like explain to myself why it was a mistake, just to try to not make the same mistake again. And then I also wrote down the new words I encountered during the practice exercises and also the mock exam. And then another practice page of causative, passive, and causative, passive, because those are also a few grammar points I struggle with on the daily basis, kind of. So yeah, I also tried to get it all inside of my brain. And then another practice exam, practice sentences, from the grammar points I wasn't quite sure about yet. And so I tried to write like 1 or 2 sentences using the grammar point to just see again how they work and how I could be using them or how they could be used in the exam. And then this was actually from May this year, so I lied. I didn't use it for like 3 months. And I tried to practice the leeches from Anki. So if you get a word a lot of times wrong, then Anki will categorize it as a leech, so as a word that kind of hinders your progress. I marked a few of those words and then I tried to make sentences out of them with nouns, verbs, and adverbs. It worked a little bit, like with a few words I am now fine, but other words I still don't get right on Anki. I only did this once, but I think it would be a good practice to keep doing in the future. Not right now, because I already made up my goals for the new quarter, but maybe for next year or something it would be a good idea to do again. I still have quite a lot of room in this notebook, so it's not done yet, only paused. And then I think I used this one in 2023. And I started this for words that are quite similar. So either words that kind of sound similar but have different meanings, or words that actually have the same meaning but are written differently. Like they have like little nuances. For example, like kiken and abunai. Again, I didn't last very long with this one because I liked the idea, but I just found the folder to be very impractical. So yeah, I was a bit annoyed by it and just stopped doing it. And I think also because of the JLPT preparation, I also stopped doing that. And then I just also forgot about it. So quite a few reasons why I didn't keep doing it. And I also didn't really review it, which was the biggest struggle, because there's no point in writing everything down if I don't look at it again. So now I will just write the differences on the Anki cards I create, so that I will just learn it as I will review the Anki cards. And then the last notebook I paused is actually from the beginning of this year. It's a campus notebook I got in Thailand. And I used it for the 88 sentence patterns book that I also got in Thailand. And there I basically always wrote like one of the patterns down, what it means and how it's used, to like make an overview for myself. I didn't really review this, and again, there's no point in like writing it down just to have it sitting on a shelf. So I stopped, and I also paused the book because it was not as important for me for like preparing for language school and stuff. That's why there are only a few pages used actually. I think I will probably continue writing the things down after I will return from Japan, because sometimes, even though it's like not the best use of the time probably, it helps me to just write things down for the first time to kind of organize the information in my head and then learn it with Anki cards. So yeah, that's probably the plan for that. And those are all my paused notebooks. And now we only have my active notebooks left. The first one I actually started way back in November 2021, and I still use it today. And this is the notebook I use for my writing practice. So when I write a longer text, I will then try to get it corrected. Back then I got it corrected through HelloTalk, but now I give it to my italki teacher and she will correct it for me. And I also have like a color code on the side. So new words I marked in blue, and then words I should know but forgot, I marked them in lilac. Grammar mistakes, I marked them in pink. After I got my corrections, I used to write like everything down and then mark everything. I also made like lists with new words I encountered, also the words I forgot, and only later I also added the section for the grammar points I got wrong to explain myself, like in the section, why I should have used it differently. I wrote a lot of little texts, and I'm really proud of myself that I stuck with it, because I still remember how uncomfortable I felt like writing such long text, because, for example, this text was quite long for me when I started to use this notebook, and especially this one. Like, this was really long. I think I haven't written such a long text in a really long time. So yeah, this was my first like really big text. And yeah, I tried to write about like things that happened in my life and to use vocabulary I already knew, and also to use grammar points I already knew. And yeah, it just keeps going. Quite a lot of text actually. Oh, and here I left 1 or like 2 pages blank because I didn't write a text down and got corrected, and I wanted to do it afterwards someday, but I haven't done it yet, and it's from 2023, so I don't know if I will ever fill it in, but yeah. I just recently started to do my writing practice weekly. It's really fun and definitely rewarding. And like after doing it for like 3 weeks now, I definitely see the differences in mistakes. For example, this one was the last text. And as you can see, there's almost only like blue highlights and only like tiny bit of red. And most of the time the problems are the particles. As you can see, I used kind of like 2/3 of the notebook already, but I still have 1/3 left. So I guess I will keep on using this notebook next year as well. And this one I started in January of 2024. And I still use it today because it's the notebook I use for my Kokonihon Nihon course. It's a really cute notebook. I got this in Thailand at Moshi Moshi for like €1 or something, and it's quite good, like quality-wise. And I actually have to say before I show you everything, it's a bit inspired by the notebook I've seen on Ari no Yumi's channel, because I also watched her flip-through video, and I think she had quite a lot of good ideas to make them more like usable and user-friendly. And the first tip I used from her was to make a table of contents. I wrote down every grammar point I covered in the course in German and then also in Japanese, and then on which page the grammar point is and which number I gave the grammar point, because when I do my writing practice, then it's way easier to see what grammar I have learned and what grammar I could be using in the new text. Then we start with the first chapter and the first lesson. There's always a little writing exercise where you have to answer a few questions, and then there are a few grammar lessons. I just write down the title and then what it means, sometimes in English, sometimes in German, sometimes both mixed because that's just how my brain works these days. Then I also write down an example sentence that uses the grammar point, and also more sentences that uses the grammar point as the exercises. Then more grammar points. Yeah, most of the time it's actually only grammar points I write down, because the kanji practice I just do with the Learn Japanese Kanji app. I also use the worksheets they give me for kanji on my iPad, so that's why it's not in this workbook. Another thing I kind of copied was the table. So there's also like the grammar point I covered, and then on which page, and then how many times I reviewed it, like 2 times out of 5 times. And then if I already feel comfortable with it. And I also put little sticky notes on the side to indicate where which chapter starts, to make it easier for me to just like move around in the workbook. It's kind of the same for every chapter, not gonna lie. Then from chapter 3 on, I also started to use more stickers to make it more fun to look through the workbook again. Because as I said multiple times before, the goal is definitely to go back through the notebooks and also to study with the notebooks. So I try to make them as like attractive for me as possible. And I feel like this definitely worked. Like I like to look back into them a lot more now that I kind of like modified them. Now I'm currently on chapter 5 out of 11, so I still have quite a long way to go with the Gogo Nihon course, but yeah, I guess I will finish it next year then. So this was the second current notebook, and the last one is my kanji notebook actually, which I started in June of 2024, so very recently. And if you've watched my last video, then you know why. But yeah, I also kind of said it in the beginning that I wanted a new notebook for the kanji words I learned from the Kanji Look and Learn workbook right now. And the other kanji workbook was almost full, so I just wanted to use a new one. I write it from top to bottom and from left to right. I tried to separate the days, like with the green lines, just to see how much I study like on a daily basis. And when I make a mistake, I just erase it and write it in pink, that I know at the end like which kanji I struggled with the most and how many mistakes I've made this day. I'm not that far into it because I just started last month, so it's very quick to go through. I also wrote down the dates where I studied because I realized I didn't really do this in my other notebooks, but sometimes it would be kind of handy. So I just decided to start writing the dates down from now on. And yeah, that's the last notebook actually, I think. Yeah, it is. I also have a few notebooks on my iPad. I never lasted long. I think I started one and then I did 3 pages and stopped. So I'm not the biggest digital note taker, so that's why I didn't show it in this video, because I think there's no point. I hope it was somewhat interesting or helpful for you. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye bye!